Hey everybody, welcome to the Fired Up with CJ show. We have Christine VanDeVelde here, and she's talking about her book, College Admission from Application to Acceptance, Step by Step. Oh my goodness, this is the best book for any of you who are college bound and seniors in high school or juniors in high school. You absolutely have to get this book because it takes all the anxiety out of, I think, usually what's depicted as a crazy time. So I'm really excited to talk to Christine to help us kind of make sense out of what seems to be misery for many people at this time. So welcome, Christine.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you here. So I wanted to talk to you. Now, in the book, it says that you talked to 70 deans of admissions, but I recall that from yesterday, you've talked to more than that, right? I mean, at this point.
Well, yes, at this point, between the website and the revision of the book, we've talked to, I would say, over almost 200 experts in the field. And that includes not just deans, but also financial aid, high school college counselors, the president of the ACT Inc., the head of the college board, that kind of thing as well.
Wow, wow. Okay, that's great. So, and the co-author that you have, Robin Mamlet, is that how you pronounce her last name? Was the former dean of admissions at Stanford, Haverford, and Sarah Lawrence. So she added a lot of her own information, I think, when writing this, and you use your reporter savvy to kind of pull it all together.
And but it was actually Stanford Swarthmore.
Swarthmore, okay. Okay, got it. Okay, got it. So, when you actually have been talking to the variety of different people that you've talked to, is there commonality in terms of the admission process? And, what are they looking for? Is there commonality in terms of what they do in terms of admitting students?
I would say no.
Okay.
Yeah, no.
That's frustrating.
The answer that you'll hear most often with regard to questions in college admission is it depends.
Okay.
It's upon the school primarily. And but there are some commonalities in terms of approach to decision making. And that is that most schools fall into one of two camps.
Okay.
Public universities tend to fall into a camp that looks at applications from basically a specific criteria point of view, at least in the preliminary stages of the process. They're going to look at things like test scores and grades.
Okay.
So it's more of a quantitative approach. And then in the later stages, even they will be holistic, which is what most private colleges are.
Okay.
What that means is that not only do they look at grades and scores, but they look at a student's essay, a student's extracurricular activities, any special talents that students have. So they're looking at the whole person.
Okay.
So in that way, you can divide schools into kind of two different camps in terms of how they look at applications. But when it comes to what they require from students for the application process, they are all different in the particulars.
You mean in terms of how they weigh certain aspects of the application, whether it's recommendations or essays? Is that what you mean?
Certainly that, but also more importantly, in terms of what they ask for from the student. Which is a really important thing for students to remember because that means that they have to pay very close attention to what each school is asking for. Testing policy, some schools want the SAT, all schools take the SAT or ACT.
Right.
So some schools want a score from the SAT or ACT. Other schools don't want any standardized test scores, but will want to have subject test scores or a graded paper submitted in lieu of that. Some schools have no essay.
Right.
Other schools have not only the common application essay, but 4 or 5 additional supplemental essays.
Right.
So in the details, they all have a very different approach.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. And so, is there a weighing, like it sounds like from reading your book, College Admissions from Application to Acceptance Step by Step, you mentioned that grades are the first thing. So don't sacrifice your SAT prep. Don't sacrifice your grades for your SAT prep. That seems to be the first thing. SAT seem to be the second thing. What is there a stack rank of some of the other items in the application?
There absolutely is. And although, again, this depends upon the school.
Yeah.
But what I can tell you is the National Association for College Admission Counseling does a fabulous annual report each year where they basically survey admission departments and offices across the country. And really, this comes back in the same manner. The top four usually come back in the same manner every year. And they are grades in college preparatory courses, strength of curriculum, test scores, and overall GPA.
Wow. Okay.
So that tells you what the most important thing is
Yeah.
what they refer to as the academic record.
Right. Right.
So it's the grades that students get and the courses that they take. So it's really important for
And would you say it's like 80% of it, or I mean, I'm trying to figure out as a weighting. I mean, or I just can't, because people are freaking out about extracurriculars. I remember in grammar school, there was a little girl who started up a nonprofit in some country. I'm like, really? Oh my gosh, you've got to be kidding me. So people were doing all these crazy things in terms of extracurricular, and I don't really get a sense of how important it is.
Well, that's extracurriculars are one of the great kind of urban myths and misinformation in the process. I can tell you that in terms of ranking the rest of the variables,
Yeah.
I actually wrote it down to have it right because I think it's really important.
Yeah.
After all of the kind of the grade and academic record stuff,
Yes.
next comes essays.
Yeah. Just the quality of your essay, how well it's written.
Next comes recommendations from the teachers and the counselor. After that comes class rank, which fewer and fewer schools are using, by the way. But it's important particularly for public universities.
Right.
And the last factor is extracurricular activities.
Oh my goodness. Why? Why are we parents torturing ourselves and our children for the extracurricular?
Well, that's a good thing. And I know that parents and students get kind of all wound up.
They
but
do.
Here's really the bottom line. What parents and students should remember is that students are being evaluated to enter a learning community.
Yes, we forget, don't we?
That's right. So the most important thing they want to know about a student is what they're like in the classroom.
Yeah. Well, here's the difficult thing, and you talk about this in your book on college admissions. You talk about how grade inflation. So, an A in one school may be different than an A in another school. And so is that why they have the SATs to normalize those numbers? Or how do they actually deal with grade inflation? Because there's some, let's say you go to Exeter or Choate or some of these really competitive high schools and you get an A in math. That may be different than going to a public school here in Seattle and getting an A.
Well, colleges that do holistic admissions, but also public universities, they know most of the high schools from which students are coming.
Okay.
And as part of the admission package, the counselors at these high schools include a profile of the high school. And that profile has in depth the number of AP courses they take. Some schools may provide the college with a graph of what the students are graded at per class.
Right.
So and remember, most admission officers have regional representatives who visit these schools, talk to the counselors, have a relationship there. So they may even understand a school to the extent that they know that this AP physics teacher never gives an A.
Oh, that's great. Okay, got it. So if someone gets a B, they're not like, wow, why did you get a B in physics?
Exactly. So they really have an in-depth understanding of what kind of a school the student is coming from, what the grading structure is. They have a history of looking at these profiles. They can see if there's been grade inflation. Certainly it's a concern for colleges.
Yeah.
But they really go the extra mile to understand where that student is coming from.
Yeah, okay, so academics being really important. And so one of the things that they probably also use I think you mentioned this in your book too, is SATs. And so if you have, let's say you're an average kid, and I looked up what an average score on the SAT is, and it's 500, or roughly 500. So let's say you're 500 across the board, 500 in math, 500 in writing, 500 in reading. How much could some of those college preparatory classes raise your scores? I saw stuff on the internet from 150 to 150 per subject to larger than that? I mean, what is the myth and what's the reality with that?
Okay. That you can raise your score 150 points by taking a prep class is probably pretty much a myth.
Okay.
There's been one major study on the effectiveness of commercial test prep.
Uh-huh.
And what that found, again, I wrote this down for you, they found it resulted only in what they call modest benefits, and that
Huh.
is average score gain of 30 points.
Wow. So
Yeah,
what's
and
happening?
less than 1 point on the ACT.
Oh my God.
Right.
Wow. So why are all these myths floating around then? What are they based off of?
Well, there's a billion-dollar test prep industry.
Yeah, okay.
So it's in their interest to encourage families to pursue this. But I can tell you the one thing that does increase scores, and that is familiarity with the test.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But you can simply achieve that by going to your library, your college counselor's office, or your bookstore and getting an SAT or SAT test book and sitting down at the kitchen table. Now, you need to practice under actual test conditions.
With timing and such,
Take
yeah.
like the verbal section, half the verbal section, and then go watch TV and then come
Right.
back. You know,
Get a
you need
snack. This is not what
let
this is about.
somebody time you and
Yeah.
go through it. And
Yeah.
familiarity, and that's where you definitely do see a rise in a score with retaking the test.
Okay.
But it's simply familiarity with the test.
So you don't have to do some I mean, because not everyone can afford. I haven't even looked into how much some of these courses cost, but not everyone can afford it. Simply just getting a book from your library and taking practice tests should be just as good as taking another one of these prep classes. Is that fair?
Yeah, the vast majority of students test without any formal preparation.
Okay.
So
Okay.
there's no question about it.
Okay.
Students do need a testing plan, and I would say that in these days, students should probably plan to take either the SAT or ACT twice,
Okay.
unless, of course, they are very happy with their first score.
Right.
Now, you don't need to take both tests.
Right.
There are preliminary versions of both tests, and students can take that or take a practice test and see if they, feel better about one or the other,
Right.
or do slightly better at one or the other, and then pursue that
Yeah.
test. Because literally every college in the country that asks for standardized tests will take either test.
Okay, so let's say that you did want to familiarize yourself with the test and take some practice tests under real conditions, is what I'm hearing you say. Is there a timing? So if you want to take two tests, I talked to one college consultant that said, try to do it before do it during that November or January time period so that in June you could take it again and then, know kind of what kind of schools you're going to be then visiting for summer. Do you think that there's a strategy or kind of an ideal time on when you take those tests?
Well, certainly the later you take them, the more knowledge you have under your belt, the more maturity you have. So, that is a really important factor.
Okay.
Certainly, when you're going to apply, if you're going to apply it under an early program, that's going to dictate. The
Right.
fact is that in there, at the beginning of junior year, students need to sit down and figure out a testing plan.
Right. Okay.
Most students will test in the spring of junior year
Okay.
and for the first time.
Okay.
And we highly recommend that if the PSAT or the earlier version of the ACT, which in 2015 will be a completely new plan,
Right.
that if they have preliminary access to a preliminary version of the test, that they do that, because that gives them some idea of where they stand in terms of preparation.
Okay.
And where they need to brush up on their skills, maybe, particularly.
Right. Okay, so take the PSAT, which like in our schools, the PSATs are being administered in October. So take the PSAT, figure out where you need to familiarize and practice on that particular test, and then take it. So if you take it in January through June, you're saying there probably is going to be a difference in terms of score. Will it be enough to make a difference on when you take the test?
I don't know if there's any data on that. I
Okay.
think it depends upon the student.
Right.
And again, taking these preliminary versions may give them some idea.
Okay.
If their math skills are low, they may think, okay, I need some more math. I need another semester
Right.
of math, or maybe even some tutoring.
Right.
you know, in order to move on with the test. But the thing about testing, and we say this in the book,
Right.
is that it's less important than parents and students think it is, and more important than colleges will tell you it is. But you know, the thing is that you really, really want to go back to what we talked about at the top, and that is how important grades are
Right.
and coursework. And don't become a professional test taker, because you really need the time in the classroom, and doing your homework is much more important to your application
Right.
than your test scores.
Right. If you're going to prioritize for grades over test scores. But let's say you have the time, your parents have the money, you have the summer to take. I mean, how far in advance do you prep? Or even like you said, you're doing a couple tests at your kitchen table under real conditions. I mean, if you're preparing for the May test in junior year, would you start practicing in February or March or April?
No, no, you don't want to practice the week before.
Okay.
But closer to the to the timing of the test that you practice, the better.
Okay. Okay. God. So
That's
because I was looking on the internet and someone said I'm spending 5 hours a day, every day to study for the SATs, and I was just like, my God, what are you doing? This is awful. And I thought, what are kids doing to prepare for this? And he said, I think I can raise my point, but he was at something like 650 with each score, but he was trying to get to 750 or seven. I don't know what he was trying to do, but he was studying for 4 or 5 hours a day. And I thought, oh my God, what kind of life does this child have? And what do people do? I don't know what normal looks like. So,
So normal does not look like that, and
Okay.
that is a waste of time and money, if you ask me.
okay.
You know, again, go back to what's important. Don't become a professional test taker. There are many other things you can be doing your junior and senior year to enhance your, you know, your chances of
Right.
admission. You know, it's just a waste of time. And also, I'm sure that you've seen that the movement in admissions is toward more and more schools going test optional.
Wow. Okay.
And I think that, you know, the efficacy or the reliability of test scores in predicting how students will do in college is coming more and more under scrutiny. And that is a trend that is going to continue. You're going to see more and more schools become test optional. Now, test optional does not mean you do not have to test at all.
Okay.
Maybe that in some cases it is, but you still may be required, for instance, to submit subject tests.
Right.
Or
I see.
as I said, a graded paper.
Right.
Or have an additional recommendation, and some schools ask for a face-to-face interview.
Right. I see.
Not going to test.
Right.
So there are other kind of steps in the process that are going to be put in there, but standardized testing has gone to the wayside. And with some big schools, University of Arizona, DePaul University, and some selective schools, Wake Forest, you know, so it's a trend that you're going to see.
Interesting. Okay, so one of the great you have again this literally is step by step. So I wanted to move to the applying and choosing the schools, which you actually have in your book, College Admissions. And for folks out there, you can get more information about Christine's website. In fact, at Christine CHRISTINE VanDeVelde VanDeVelde, sorry, VanDeVelde.com. So make sure to check that out. And also,
the book has a website called collegeadmissionbook.com.
okay, got it. And I noticed there's quite a bunch of resources available like that, like templates and things like that.
Yes.
And then folks, you can actually find us on firedupwithcj.com for a bunch of other parenting information. So let's go back to applying. So again, let's take the average student. We're going to take the average student in Washington because that's where I'm from. So let's say there's an average student that gets 500 across the board. And one of the things that I really, really liked about your book is you have a strategy, which you say, okay, and I think I got this right. You said, pick 15 to 20 schools that you think are going to be schools that you like, and then whittle that down to 8 to 10 by visiting some of the schools and doing research online, which I thought was really great. And it's amazing because when I was young, we never had any of those resources, but it sounds like there's a ton of resources available. So then you narrow those 15 to 20 down to 8 to 10, of which 3 of them would be solid, which is like you have a really high, I'm going to have you define these because I don't know if I have them memorized. 3 solid, 3 probable, 2 possible, and 2 statistical reach. And so tell us a little bit about what a solid, possible, and statistical reach. And what I did is I actually sent you some of the Western schools and some of the scores also in the script that we have, because I was just kind of curious, because I was reading and thinking, I don't know how to map this together in real life to how to make this happen. So,
Well, one of the things that students and parents one of the games that students and parents love to play in this process is called What Are My Chances?
right.
Okay, the only person who can reliably tell you what your chances are the deans of admission at these individual schools. That said, you do want to be working with a list of colleges that, to which you will apply, that looks at selectivity, and that's what we were talking about here. And that is your chances of admissibility.
Right.
And when a school is selective, that just simply means that they don't have enough seats for all the applicants who are applying. So they have to select their applicants.
Okay.
So there are 2 really important ways in which, after you kind of put together a list where you're looking at, okay, I want a public university, I want some private universities, I don't want to be rural, I'd like to be, urban, they have my major. Then you're going to look at 2 really important factors. You're going to look at selectivity first. And that is where the probable, possible, solid comes from. So the first thing is a solid. And that's a school where when you look at the profile for the freshman class that was most recently admitted, you can see that your GPA and test scores are in line with most of those students who were admitted.
Okay.
In other words, students who look like you are almost always admitted.
Okay, that's a solid, you're saying.
That's a solid school.
Okay, got it. So if I were to look at the scores, I was looking at, 500. I look at, say, Utah State University. 470, 480 is kind of the, 470, 480, they don't even have a writing thing. So would that be a solid school for me?
I'm looking, okay, Utah State, 470.
480, or University of Colorado, Denver.
You have a 500? I
Yeah.
would say yes.
Okay, those are solid schools because I'm actually a little bit above that. But then how about something like, I'm looking at the scores in the West Coast, University of California, Davis, 520 and 570 and 530. So that's slightly above where I am at 500.
That would be a probable or possible school for you.
Okay.
That's an instance where you'd want to look for more information, for instance, at their test scores.
Okay. Okay. So you want to look at grades and other kind of things that they're in terms of what they have. Okay.
Because solid are schools where, they almost always admit students who look like you on paper.
Okay.
And then you go to probable. And there your chances of being admitted, so you're, like if you're in that top 25%,
Right.
like say at University of California, Davis, that you had a 520. That would be a probable school for you. In a possible school, that means your chances of being rejected are higher, but they still do accept some students like you.
Right. Okay. So if I look at this list, like University of California, Berkeley is 600, 630, 610 for reading, math, and writing. Is that like a possible or statistical reach in your model?
That's a possible.
Okay. Got it.
That's a possible. The statistical reach schools are really easy to define because those are the most highly selective schools.
Okay.
Harvard, Stanford, MIT, I think Williams,
Right.
where their selectivity is at 6%, 5%. In other words, out of 100 students,
Right.
at only 5.
Right. Okay.
Those statistical reach schools are schools where no one can reliably interpret their chances of admission.
I see. So why not apply? You might as well apply, even though, let's say I got 500 across the boards and Harvard is like 700 across the board. It's like, well, if you really want to go to Harvard and you think that you could do well, then apply.
Yeah, why not? Why not? Why not reach high? That's our
Okay.
philosophy. And we don't think kids should ever be told they shouldn't apply to a school, but they do want to have a balanced list because you want to have some choices.
Right.
If you have 500s and you apply only to highly selective schools, you're probably not going to be admitted anywhere. That's
Right.
the probability.
Right.
So but we think that in a list of 8 to 10 that there are a couple statistical reach spaces, room for a couple of
Okay. So
and
statistical
also
reach are the sorry.
one thing too, and that is there may be something about your profile that that speaks beyond your grades and scores. Are you
Right.
the first generation in your family?
Right.
Do you have special talent? That kind of thing. So you
Right.
want to keep that in mind as well.
Right. So then a statistical reach are those like those top Ivy League schools that you've heard about. Uh, uh, Possible is like that's I think had a different term for it. It's like most selective, so you get 22% of those applying get in. Is there a correlation between selective, highly selective, most selective, and the solid, probable, possible statistical reach?
No, I mean, there's definitely a sidebar in the book where we kind of try to explain it to students and parents because it's really kind of a hard concept, I think, to
Yeah.
wrap your head around. But it is, you're making a judgment call. And a student's making a judgment call with this list. As I said, the only one who
Yeah.
knows
Yes,
is the
it's
dean of
true.
admission.
Right.
So, but there are probabilities in life.
Right.
And, if you follow this strategy, you definitely will get into, more than one school.
Right. Yeah.
So if if there's nothing else that I don't know about you.
Yeah, no, it's about probabilities, right? So you're looking at this, and from what I heard from reading your book, it seems like certain schools they'll just take you based on certain scores. If you have a certain GPA and a certain SAT, you're just in. I think you were talking about that as what kind of school? Give me an example of a kind of school that does that.
Mostly public universities.
You mean so like University of Maryland or University
You
of
have
Washington?
you have to go college by college and university by university and look at them and see what the philosophy is. But for instance, like University of Oregon did that for many years, and then in the last 2 years, their applications went up so high they had to, stop that. And then, it's state by state because a lot of the time, public universities are, based on the, Constitution, like in Texas, where they
Right.
take top 10% of every high school is automatically granted admission to something in the, somewhere in the UT.
Right.
I believe in a University of California, they have, you can basically tell you're admissible. I can't remember what the statistics are at one of the schools. In other words, you may apply to Berkeley, but you may not get into Berkeley. You may get into Merced or Riverside or someplace else.
Right.
So the public universities are most likely to have these definitive quantitative approaches.
Okay, but if like say for example, like University of Washington, I was pretty surprised the SATs are relatively high for University of Washington, but I'm from Washington State, so let's say that I have the same grade, same set of profile as someone else from California that's applying. Do those public schools give preferences like in California or in Texas to those people residents in state?
Yes, they do, and it's often again set legislatively in terms of percentages of students they can admit that they must admit from in-state, and then there's a percentage that they're allowed to admit from out of state.
Oh, interesting. Okay. All
And
right.
all public universities have gotten much more competitive in the last few years because of the economic crisis.
Oh. Huh, interesting.
Because they're largely, especially if you're an in-state student, they're more affordable.
Yeah.
And so their applications have really skyrocketed.
Yeah, and I think I was talking to someone else, and they said it's so easy now to apply to all these other schools. With the Common App, you just click a couple buttons, and like all of a sudden you're applying, which I think is probably part of what's causing the chaos, right? Because you have so many people applying to schools and apply before, because all they have to do is click a button, and all their stuff is sent.
Yes, but you know what? Don't again fall prey to that. I mean,
Okay.
that's certainly one reason why it seems like it's gotten more competitive.
Yeah.
We absolutely know that that most schools, most colleges and universities admit 70% of their applicants.
Wow. That's a lot.
Well, that's because the media only write about as if there are only 8 colleges in the United
Right.
States. but there are more than 2,200 colleges.
Right, and you'll get in 70%. Right, exactly.
So,
Okay, so one of the things that you said was, it's probably important to visit your schools, not only so you can whittle down your list from, 15 to 20 to 8 to 10, but that schools, if you're nearby, like University of Washington is probably 3 miles, so if I don't go visit, it's going to look kind of bad. So I get that. But, and I can understand, like, even Whitman College, which is, 3 or 5 hour drive, like, if we don't go visit, are they thinking, if you're really interested, you're going to come visit the campus. What's reasonable, in California, we could take a 1.5 hour flight. And because you're saying that these kind of things kind of show demonstrated interest, which with some colleges actually makes a difference. So what's a reasonable, if you're on a budget or, what's a reasonable visit plan?
well, before I answer that question, I want to just tell you one thing, and that is one of the big surprises of the NACAC annual report was how demonstrated interest rose in the rankings of factors that are important.
Oh, interesting.
So in these days of more and more applications, demonstrated interest can become more and more important.
Right.
And schools may or may not tell you whether they use it.
Right.
For instance, Davidson College, they're very clear that it makes a difference. Stanford states right on their website, we do not calculate demonstrated interest into our decision.
Right.
The rule of thumb for visits in terms of demonstrated interest is that if you are within 1 day of driving of a college campus, then you should visit.
Oh, man. Okay. All right. Well, no, that's perfect. It's a perfect rule of thumb.
And if time and money are a consideration, like you say, California is an hour and a half plane ride away, that is a hurdle for many families.
Right.
But there are other ways to show demonstrated interest.
Uh-huh.
For instance, if University of California comes and does a presentation in your community, you want to make sure that you attend, fill out the information cards, they have your name, they know you were there. I'm not saying University of California uses demonstrated interest, but you could slip in the name of any private or public school for that.
Right.
Students can reach out to the college themselves. And in addition, most high schools have representatives from these schools visiting. And if that's the case, the student should make every effort to attend that information session and make sure that that college rep has their name and knows that they were there.
Okay, so I know when we were applying to private school in this area, there's a lot of like, when I'm here, let's make a big splash. I mean, did they just want to make sure your name is signed in, or are you trying to make, an impact? Should you dress perfectly or, make some profound statement during the visit, or that,
No, you should address appropriately. You should have all your manners on high alert.
Yes.
If there's an opportunity to participate, I would recommend participating. But it's not about who can be the loudest or the most noticeable, or standing up and reciting your resume for all.
Right.
I think those kind of things will actually work against you. Remember, you're being evaluated to be a member of a community.
Yeah, don't stand up and say, I have double 700s. How would I fit in to your school? This is not what they're looking for. Okay, so essay writing, you say in your book, and this is something that a lot of people stress out with too. And it's interesting because when you're telling me about the factors, it's one factor, but it's not like, you got to kill yourself for essays. People hire professional essay writers, all these different things. Now, you say that you should start the summer of your junior year, I think, to start writing your essays. But are the common applications, because I'm so far away from this, but are the common applications available in the summer of your junior year for the next calendar year?
The common application usually comes available on August 1st.
Okay.
Now, this year, they announced publicly very early on that the essay questions were not changing.
Oh,
and
nice.
So students could work on them as early as May, which I don't recommend.
Have a summer.
But certainly, we highly recommend that they go back to school senior year with at least the common application essay completed.
Okay, got it. Okay.
Most colleges, when they go online, that are members of the common application, they will include their supplements too. So you may have some supplements available, and there are those shorter answer and essay questions too available during the summer. I'm not sure how the Universal College application handles it. But also, you probably, your public universities, your in-state public universities, if they require an essay, that's probably available over the summer as well.
Okay, so you can get a lot of it done. I don't understand why people stress out and do it during senior year because it seems like the most stressful time to do it. I totally don't get it. If you're a planner, I would just do it during a summer. What is the big deal? I don't get it.
Yeah, procrastination is right up there. As a students and families get stressed. I mean,
Okay.
applying to college is not rocket science. We say
Yeah.
that again and again. What it is, it's like any big project that you do, whether it's something for your AP US history or parents, as can relate to from many instances in their life.
Right.
And that is, it's just a big project that you need to break down into smaller parts.
Right, so it doesn't get overwhelming. Yeah, and one of the things that I really appreciate in your book is you just have like junior year, just do all these things, and if you do all these things, it will not be overwhelming, which I greatly appreciate because most people don't have a plan, so then they start doing it all senior year, and then it is overwhelming. Okay, so there's a universal app, and then there's a common app. Is there a and you said that for both of them, are the prompts generally going to be the same year to year, so you can say what it was in 2014.
Unfortunately, you cannot count on that.
Okay.
Most high school counselors would love it if they would either do that or announce early in the summer what the prompts will be.
Right. Right.
Right. And that may be a change that's coming because there certainly is, you know, because of the pressure. It is a lot of work senior year. It's like taking
Yeah.
an AP course.
Yeah.
That's how we instruct students and parents to think about it. So to have that available to you over the summer and, to give you kind of a kickstart would be really nice, but it hasn't happened.
Yeah, okay. Okay. I just thought it would be nice. Okay. But it seems like generally if they talk about there's going to be something about your experiences. There's going to be something about that you can probably fit whatever you would write about in one of these prompts. Is that right? I mean, it sounds like I couldn't even get up to the test without having to apply and fill out all my information. So I don't know what the prompts are.
So, well, yes, and it's like, and the thing to keep in mind is that colleges know that you're just teenagers doing teenage things.
Right.
I think one of my favorite things to ask deans of admission when I talk to them was, what's the most memorable essay you've ever read?
Yes.
And it inevitably was not something like big subject like world peace.
Right.
It also wasn't something that maybe thousands of students do, like Model UN.
Right.
And like one dean of admission told me a young woman wrote about how every Thursday night was date night and she would babysit her younger siblings and her parents would make a healthy meal. And as soon as the door closed behind them, the girls would make Kraft macaroni and cheese. So, they're looking for who you are, what your character is. Another student wrote about raising pigs in 4-H.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. That's interesting.
Yeah, exactly. Another student wrote about holiday traditions in their family and how she was expected to sing a song every Christmas. And in adolescence, she kind of rebelled against it. And then she realized that really it was just, they didn't care that her singing was bad or that, and it wasn't about her. It was about the family.
Yeah, that's
So
sweet.
they're looking for it's the one place in the college application where the student's voice is standing alone.
Right. Well, you
And
get a
it's not
qualitative,
very
yeah.
depressing.
Yeah, you
And
get a
it's not
qualitative
true
sense.
conversation.
Yeah, those stories that you're telling, you get a qualitative sense of what the values are and the priorities of that person. Maybe
Exactly.
whether it's deceiving your parents or whatever it may be. Okay, so applying. So there's this whole early decision, rolling decision. I mean, there's so many options. I don't remember there ever being so many options when I was applying, but it seems like there's so many different options right now. And it seems like when, I actually went to my college admissions place and they said, if you apply early admissions, so I went to Duke and they said, if you apply early admissions and you're an alumni or legacy, as you call it in your book, then what happens is we're going to read your application versus like where you may normally be cleaved off. Off of the list. And then they said, and then they showed the application rates and it really was like, it was probably triple the app if you do early decision versus not early decision. So, I can understand how in those particular cases maybe it makes sense, and you have some really good points in your book. If your grades are not so great junior year and you expect improvement in senior year, then wait till senior year so they can see that trajectory.
Right.
Um, but let's say that you actually have reasonably good scores in junior year, and you also have, and which is your first admission, and you'd like to increase the probability of, and does it increase your probability? So let's say that, you have good grades, good SATs, and whether you applied in early decision or not, you pretty much would have similar kind of comparable, positions. Does it help to do early decision or not?
Listen, this again is a place where the response is it depends.
Okay.
And what it depends on is how the college uses their early program.
Right. Okay.
Some colleges use it to, for some colleges, it's the most competitive part of the cycle.
Oh.
In other words, they're admitting students with the highest scores and the highest grades during that cycle.
Okay.
For other colleges, it's how they fill the bottom 10, 25% of their class potentially. In other words, they're looking for students whose grades and scores maybe aren't as good, but they've demonstrated real commitment and enthusiasm for the school. And I just want to reiterate that we're talking about early decision, which is binding early program.
Right. Yeah. If you sign up, you're
action.
like, yeah, you have to go to that school. I get it.
So anyway, you cannot game admissions by applying early decision.
Okay.
As one, Nancy Meslon, who's the Dean of Admission at Wesleyan, said, it doesn't have a Rumpelstiltskin effect. You can't spin C's into A's. You can't spin bad grades into gold.
Right, exactly. I get it.
And so, you can talk to the admission office and ask them how they use their early program, and may or may not tell you.
Right.
I think it's far more likely that they will not tell you.
Right.
But, you should only apply early decision if you're really, really committed to a school. It's your first choice. You're the kind of student who doesn't easily change their mind.
Right.
And you're the kind of family that does not need to compare financial aid offers.
Right. And I think there's so let's say that you actually did apply early decision, and then, and let's say that again, let's say you had triple 700s across, and GPA of 4.0 in early decision, and pretty much if I were to apply later in regular decision, I'd have the same scores. If I got denied in early decision, was I going to get denied in regular decision anyways, and it's just telling me sooner?
Again, there's really honestly no way to tell. It's one of those situations where you could call up the admissions office. And by the way, when I say call up the admission, I mean the student should call. The parent should never be calling.
Okay.
And the schools will take note of that, and it matters to them.
Okay. Okay.
And so, but call the admission office. They're very happy to hear from students, which I think is very different from the time when I went to school where I never thought of calling the admission office. But they're happy to hear from students. They encourage it. And talk to the office about, they may not tell you exactly why you were denied, but they may give you some hints as to what you would need to do in order to be admitted. Or they may say, we had an incredibly competitive early cycle, we hope you'll remain in the regular pool, and we'd love to consider your application again. In which case, it was just a numbers game.
Okay.
Or they may tell you, we'd like to see another semester of grades from you.
Okay, got it. So they'll tell you.
You better, amp up your game or start looking at other alternatives.
But I thought the options were either you're denied, you're accepted, or you're rolled over to the next, to regular decisions.
Right, I'm talking about if you're rolled over.
Okay, I see. So if you're rolled over, then ask them what's the likelihood at this point?
Yeah, not likelihood, but I would say approach them as, what can I do to improve my chances for admission to the regular cycle?
Right. And I read from your book, if you're denied, you're denied. Like, please don't be like those awful people from American Idol and try to sing your way in. No. That's not going to work.
Yeah, there's no bonus round for trying to.
Okay. All right. Okay, got it. So
That's not true in regular admission, though. Some schools have an appeal process in regular admission.
I know, I saw that,
especially public universities.
Which sounds insane to me, to actually have to go and appeal your decision. That's kind of insanity to
Yeah,
me.
I would
Okay.
advise students to move on and find another
Yeah,
school to
let,
play.
let go, let go. Life is telling you it's not working. The other schools will be fine. Okay, so then another thing that I've heard as strategy is, let's say that, I really wanted to get into Dartmouth and I got into University of Pennsylvania instead, or, whatever. Or I got into my University of Maryland, and you go to University of Maryland, you get straight A's, you have a great GPA. What's the likelihood that you can then go back to Dartmouth and say, like, now can I come and get transferred?
Well, you can apply for transfer. It would, you know, transfer admissions are much more competitive
Oh,
than
they
regular
are.
admissions or early admissions.
Oh, I wouldn't have thought
So,
that.
it can be much more difficult. You likely cannot do it until after sophomore year,
Okay.
although you can try it after freshman year. But there's just no way to say. We don't know why. You'll never really know why you were not admitted.
Okay.
And so, but I wouldn't discourage anyone from trying to transfer.
Wait, if that's the school that you really want to go to for whatever reason. I guess it's a parent myth because I've heard parents say, like, oh, honey, oftentimes what happens if you don't get into your first choice, you can reply again and the probabilities are much easier the second round. Not true.
No, just ask any statistics or economics major, and they will tell you that it just can't be true.
Okay. All right. So just in closing, I wanted to ask you about, so as you say in the book, there are a lot of myths. People are all freaked out during this time. What would the three pieces of advice, like what are some myths that you want to dispel, and what are some pieces of advice you'd like to give people to kind of calm their nerves about this?
Oh gosh. Well, I would say that, again, it's not rocket science. Approach it as you would any big project, break it down into manageable parts over a timeline and approach it that way. And I think in the book we even say use that as a mantra. It's not rocket science.
Right.
I would say that try to there's a lot of misinformation and urban myth and what one high school principal called broccoli talk. And that is she defined as the often spurious information parents trade over the vegetable bins at the local grocery store.
We do a lot of that.
Right. And I would tell parents and students to try to resist the broccoli talk.
Okay.
And you see it in the media as well as finding it in the hallways and on the soccer sidelines. Try to and look to the true experts for information, and those are your high school college counselors and your deans of admission.
Yeah. Perfect. And then also this book, don't discount the book. This is College Admissions from Application to Acceptance Step by Step. We have Kristen VanDeVelde, and we've been talking about her fantastic book. I would highly, highly recommend it. Tell us your website again.
collegeadmissionbook.com.
Yeah, and what kind of stuff do you have on there for folks that are interested in getting?
Oh gosh, we have a ton of stuff, ton of guidance for writing essays, testing guidance, timelines, what juniors should be doing, what seniors do. We have many, many interviews with deans of admission from across the country about their schools and about admissions. We also have a very fun gourmet guide if you're visiting colleges.
A gourmet guide!
We have the admission officers and alumni who tell you the real places to eat.
I love it.
Best places to eat while you're visiting colleges. So there's all sorts of material.
It's comprehensive. If you get down to a gourmet guide, it sounds like it's pretty
on
comprehensive.
Facebook and Twitter and Pinterest and Tumblr. And all those links are on the website. So
Okay.
you can get from there.
All right. Blessings, blessings, I bow to you. This really was a great book. It really just made it, because I was getting anxious. I read another book and I was getting anxious about the whole thing. And like you said, 70% admissions rate. It's just that the hype and fear-mongering about all these other schools. So
That's right. And can I say one more thing?
yes,
It's not where you go, it's what you do when you get there.
yes, that's absolutely true.
All the studies, everything show that long-term economic success in life has nothing to do with where your sheepskin is from.
Yeah.
It has to do with where you went and what you did. And I can give you a million examples, like the president of Disney Pixar who went to University of Utah.
Right.
And, I mean, so.
And people who didn't even go to college, like you say in your book, half of these bajillionaires like Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, like they didn't even go to college. So it's what you do afterwards, really.
And what you do while you're there.
Yeah.
It's like this guy who's president of Pixar. He created the 2 computer programs that basically animated cartoon characters' faces and made them move like human beings while he was a student playing around with
Wow.
in the computer lab.
Wow. That's cool. And I think that's actually the most important thing to recognize, right?
So, yes.
It's what you do. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here.
It means so much to me that you're listening to the show. Would love your support in any way by giving me comments below, or to subscribe to the show, or share the show with friends. Thank you again for your support. Love and blessings.